On the issue of uniting Africa, changing the narrative of Mother Africa, there are so many speeches which reminding we in Africa our role.
You know, on that day, Mwalimu said, every generation has a role to play. My generation is the generation that led the struggle for independence. Your generation must now fight a different battle, the battle of economic emancipation. And that is the battle that we are here to fight.
I believe that every generation in the continent of Africa has its positive role. The generation of our founding fathers, our former leaders, Pan-Africanists, the generation of Julius Kambarage Nyerere, Nelson Mandela, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Samora Machel, they did well at their time to take this continent in the hands of Africans. The role of current generation, I mean we young Africa, is one, to unite, to be one.
You can still hear those immortal words of the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah on the 6th day of March 1957 in Accra, Ghana, telling his Ghanaian peoples that the independence of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not independent. I can hear the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah convening a meeting in 1958 and telling Africans we must unite now, because if we don't unite, we will be manipulated. Nobody listened to the Osagie for.
So here I brought to you the speech from Pan-Africanist Professor Plo Lumumba, speaking when he was invited by the EFF led by Julius Malema in South Africa. He spoke many things on the importance and what's our role in order to unite this continent to be as one, where we can share common things, starting with banks. So I hope you will get something from this speech. Please watch it till the end and write down in the comment section what you got from this speech.
I can hear the Osagie for once again in 1960 in Casablanca, Morocco, accompanied as he was by King Idris of Libya on that day. In their presence was Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea. In their presence was King Hassan of Morocco, reminding Africa once again that we must unite. But they listened to him not. Again, on the 24th day of May 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, telling the 32 heads of states gathered in Addis Ababa, we must unite now. We must have one army. We must have one currency. We must have one foreign policy. We must be united. And I can hear the Osagie for saying, I do not want to be the leader of that country. I simply want unity. And I'm saying that we must live here with one united government. They listen not to the Osagie for. Not stop there. Because their diabolical and subterranean hands were alive then. No sooner had we regained political independence, as we were celebrating our new national anthems, as we were celebrating our new flag, as we were celebrating our new mottos and slogans, the neo-colonizer was alive and well. In 1961, they had taken out Patrice Emery Lumumba. And I can remember that famous letter of Patrice Emery Lumumba written in 1961. One day, even if you kill my body, Africa shall write our history. Today we are here to write that history. I can hear even as they took out Patrice Emery Lumumba, and in 1963 they took out Sylvanus Olympio in Togo. I can hear Sylvanus Olympio saying, "Take me out, but Africa shall not be taken out." I'm here to remind us that Africa shall not be taken out. They did not stop there. In 1966, they took out the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah and took him out of power and thought that they had finished the Osagyefo. And I can hear and read the Osagyefo writing from Guinea in Conakry say, "Africa shall never be enslaved again." We are here to remind them that we shall never be enslaved again. And they did not stop there. They went to Nigeria. And Nigeria, they took out the government of Nnamdi Azikiwe and Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. They had finished Nigeria. They did not, because Africa can never be finished. They did not stop there. They went to Mali and they thought that they had taken out Modibo Keita, and they thought that Mali would not be taken out. They did not take Mali out. They did not stop there. They went to Algeria and took out Ahmed Ben Bella, and they thought that Algeria would be taken out. They did not take Algeria out. But the neo-colonial project is alive and well, because even as that was happening, South Africa was still under the yoke of the apartheid regime. And I can hear the words of the great South Africans at that time as a young student. I can still remember the words of O.R. Tambo. I can still remember from Angola the words of Agostinho Neto. I can still remember the words of Eduardo Mondlane and Samora Moises Machel. I can still remember the words of Sam Nujoma and Andy Mbahaman Toivo ya Toivo from Namibia. I can still remember. And ultimately, you succeeded in removing the organ, the monster that was apartheid. In Zimbabwe, I can still remember Joshua Nkomo and Robert Mugabe, and they removed that monster that was the Ian Smith regime. But the question is, once we removed them, what did we do? This is the question. You know, when we remove them, we make unto ourselves many promises. We promise unto us our national anthems as we should. We fly our flags as we should. We have our slogans as we should. But yet, we have fallen short of the expectations of both God and man. That is why, when I look at Africa today, sometimes I feel sad, and many are those times when I see young Africans from the Gambia, from Burkina Faso, from Chad, from Nigeria, from Ghana, being humiliated in Tunisia, being humiliated and dying in the Mediterranean Sea. I feel sad. I feel sad. Are humiliated in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. I feel sad. I feel sad when young Africans are humiliated at the embassies of Western countries. I feel sad when young Africans play in the United States of America. I feel sad. I feel sad when young on the other side. I feel sad. I feel sad when the white man comes here. Sad. I feel sad when the Chinese come here and humiliate us. I feel sad. I know not whether you feel sad with me, but I'm inviting you to feel sad with me. I feel sad when our continent is abused by other civilizations, I feel sad. But for how that you cannot, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., ask a person with no legs and no boots to lift himself or herself by the bootstraps. You recognize that. You discovered that we must rediscover ourselves, that we must re-educate ourselves. You discovered and gave meaning to those famous words of the great Nigerian singer Femi Anikulapo Kuti when he said, "Teacher, don't teach me nonsense because you have been taught nonsense for too long." You discovered and said it as he did Carter G. Woodson in 1933, that we had been miseducated for too long and that we ought to re-educate ourselves. You discovered with my country that we must decolonize our minds. You discovered with Chinua Achebe that we have been divided and things are falling apart. That is why you are here today. So we are here to celebrate, because celebrate we must. We are here to commemorate, because commemorate we must. But we are here also to remind our enemies, and there is no shortage of them out there. There is no shortage of them. They come in the thousands, they come in the millions. But history has taught us and is teaching us always that we shall triumph. Oh, we cannot fail. We cannot afford the luxury of not failing. Oh, we cannot. I hear our enemies saying that we are saying too much. We will continue to say we have not talked enough. And if they wonder why we are saying what we are saying, let them go even to their holy books. And we are told in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God. We are giving meaning to the Word. And all those of them who are Muslims will be reminded that the very first thing that the angel Jibril told the Prophet Muhammad is, "Iqra, read." And he read and he made a speech, and we are making the speeches. We will continue to talk, but we will also act. So we are here today that there may be a wedding between our words and actions. Here in South Africa, there are many doubting Thomases. Oh, but they are reducing by the number. They are reducing because when they watch the EFF in the National Assembly of South Africa, they are reducing by the number. They are reducing by the number because when they watch the EFF, they do not only see courage, they see passion, and they fear courage and passion. But we must instill fear in them, because it is only when they are fearful that they will begin to give way. And when they begin to give way, then we will begin to conquer new territory, because new territory we must conquer. You know, this continent, you know, this South Africa, which has given birth to the EFF, is the anchor of the continent of Africa. This South Africa is the southernmost tip of the continent of Africa. This South Africa is the fulcrum of Africa. This South Africa will be the place that will give good hope to the continent of Africa. This South Africa of EFF is the one that is going to economically regenerate Africa. I remember in 1980, Africans sat in Lagos, Nigeria, and they came up with the Lagos Plan of Action and said, under the Lagos Plan of Action, that Africa was going to economically regenerate herself. I remember them saying that Africa will trade with ourselves, that Africa will buy our own gold, that Africa will trade with our own cocoa, that Africa will produce our wine, that Africa will produce and consume our uranium, the Lagos Plan of Action did not succeed. But is it not true that failure or apparent failure is the mother of success? If it is true, we did not give up. Because I remember in 1997, on the 6th day of March, to be exact, that great Tanzanian Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, speaking in Accra, Ghana, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana said, I remember, he said, that a few years ago, we doubted Kwame Nkrumah when he talked about unity. We must now apologize to Kwame. He was right, we were wrong. But we have now recognized the mistakes that we made. We will meet many challenges, but of all the sins that we can commit, there is a single sin that we must never commit: the sin of despair, the sin of giving up. EFF is the representation of our failure, refusal to give up. You know, on that day, Mwalimu said, every generation has a role to play. My generation is the generation that led the struggle for independence. Your generation must now fight a different battle, the battle of economic emancipation. And that is the battle that we are here to fight. And I remember once again, this land is in the business of producing good men and women. In the year 2013, you produced yet another woman, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And you gave her the task of being the chair of the African Union, and she wrote a letter to the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Said, Osagyefo, we asked for your forgiveness, and that is how we came up with Africa Agenda 2063 and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Under those documents, we are promising ourselves that Africa shall be economically emancipated, because we cannot allow ourselves to be under the tutelage of the International Monetary Fund. We cannot, and we must not. We must not allow ourselves to be slaves of the World Bank. We must not. We must not allow ourselves to be told who our friends are and who our enemies are and what we should and should not do. We cannot be the tail that is wagged by the dog all the time. The time has come that we must do the things that are in our best interest, and that will only happen when we are economically emancipated. You know, they say that he or she who pays the piper calls the tune. For too long we have not paid the piper. We must now pay our piper that we may call the tune. You are now telling us how to pay the piper. You are now telling us that going forward we must now economically emancipate ourselves. We cannot be a continent whose greatest claim to fame is that we are in the business of borrowing. We have borrowed for too long. We've been abused for too long. And the time, therefore, is now for this spirit of the EFF to spread. 10 years ago, when my good friend Julius Selo Malem and his comrades in arms sat somewhere here in South Africa, and the revelation was given unto them that the last colonial question was economic emancipation. And they said that we must have economic freedom in our lifetime. This idea that economic freedom is a pie in the sky we only dream about is without basis. We can get it now. We cannot be a continent where our economies are dominated by the smallest proportion of the population. We cannot be, and we must not be. And economic freedom fighters are urging you that we must now be in the business of spreading this message to the rest of the continent. I'm now urging you, my good friend, Juju. I'm now urging you and your comrades in arms. This spirit must now spread. This spirit must have a foothold in Johannesburg, or it must have a foothold in Maseru, in Lesotho it must. Or it must climb up to Mbambane in Eswatini, or it must go to Maputo in Mozambique, or it must go to Windhoek in Namibia, or it must climb up to Lilongwe in Malawi, it must go to Lusaka in Zambia, it must go to Luanda in Angola, it must go to Kampala in Uganda, it must go to Hargeisa in Somaliland, or it must not stop there. It must go to Nairobi in Kenya. It must go to Dodoma in Tanzania. No, it must not stop there. It must go to Kinshasa. Oh, it must go to Bangui. Oh, it must go to Lomé. It must go to Cotonou. Oh, it must not stop there. It must go to Juba and to Addis Ababa and to Asmara and to Sudan in Khartoum. It must go to Cairo. Oh, it must not stop there. It must go into India. Or it must go to N'Djamena, it must go to Ouagadougou, it must go to Nouakchott, it must go to Accra, or it must go to Monrovia, or it must go to Rabat, or it must go to Algiers, it must go to Monrovia, it must go everywhere in Africa. This spirit must go there. It is only when that spirit is present in every part of Africa that we shall shake Africa. When it is there, we shall no longer have visas in Africa. No, we shall not. Oh, when it is there, we shall no longer have the rand. Oh, no. We shall no longer have all these currencies. And we shall be economically liberated. Oh, it shall happen. And it must happen. Because if it doesn't happen, we will not allow it to happen. You know, sometimes there are those who think it cannot happen. Oh, but they are mistaken. They are mistaken because I remember those words of the great Ghanaian James Emmons Kwejiragri.